today. The big thing on my mind has been this idea of perfection, okay? So I was in class for 109, actually, and he was giving a short anecdote about how in a math class he was in, he got 1 point shy of a perfect score, okay? And he brought it to his math teacher, and the math teacher said, Chris, perfection is a hollow goal. And that's, and that was kind of the end of the story. So I thought that was so interesting because it made me think of Bill Walsh, right? So Bill Walsh is a legendary football coach, right? Coach of the 49ers for, I believe, 2 Super Bowls, and Stanford University as well. And Bill Walsh always talks about the perfect game. And he says he's come close, 2 times he got almost there for this perfect game. And it seems to really annoy him that he didn't get the perfect game. That was his one goal almost. And there's 2 ways to look at this. One is that your goal is to do the perfect game. So I think that's where the Chris example is no, that's a hollow goal. That's not a good idea. We can optimize for other things. But there's another way to look at it. It's okay, Bill Walsh, he finished his career. Now he could look back and he could say, well, in retrospect, did I ever make a perfect game? And wouldn't that be cool? And I guess there's value both ways. And it's kind of made me think about what I want in terms of my career aspirations. So maybe not playing a perfect game, but for me, making a perfect game. And I've really dived into this question for earlier today. And here's what I've got so far. So the first level, I think, of a perfect game, and there's a lot of ambiguity here because I'm not super determined, and I need kind of your help. I'd love to hear your opinion, Tom, Scott, Peter, Ryan, and everybody else who watches these vlogs. I'd love to hear what you think. But the lowest level, I think, is just technical competency. So a perfect game, right? It doesn't really have to do with bugs or errors. That, I think, is just pedantic compared to what we're talking about here. This is a different echelon of, let's say, precedence. So if your game Pokemon Go has trouble connecting to the servers, then you can't even begin to evaluate whether or not it's perfect. Likewise, if your game No Stranger can't save files and it needs to be fixed, then you got to fix those before you worry about this. But beyond that, there were kind of 2 metrics which I think lay the groundwork for a perfect game. The first is it being thorough, and this is an idea I've got from John Blow, who makes puzzle games, and he said that when I make a game, right, I'm allowing certain metrics to be within the game. So maybe one of the metrics is, and we'll think of a crossword puzzle, okay. One of the metrics is you've got these boxes which could have words in them, and then maybe another metric is that the words can cross over each other, okay. So these are 2 things, let's say levers, which he gives you to pull, 2 levers he creates for himself to pull in creating the game. And so the question of whether or not it's thorough is if there was enough levels to adequately explore the permutations of those levers. Is there enough levels for the levers in the game? So in a crossword puzzle, if it was a 3x3 crossword puzzle and there was only one puzzle they give you in let's say it's an app, for example, and it's a crossword app, and they only give you one puzzle to solve, that's kind of stupid, right? You just solve one puzzle and then it ends. And it's well, why couldn't you have added different words and maybe given me another challenge? There should be more levels here, given the amount of levers that you've added. And then maybe beyond that, you would say, well, it's not adequately thorough with the 3x3 matrix. Maybe it should be much larger, right? And crossword puzzles are pretty much never 3x3 because they want to have very large words in them, so you could do lots of crisscrossing. So crossword puzzles are typically maybe 15 by 15 or something large like that, right? The point is much larger than 3x3. But therein lies the rub, right? That's an opinion, whether or not it should be larger than 3x3. It's not really an opinion of whether or not there should be more words than just one a 3 by 3 puzzle, right? You should probably give me more levels. But I guess the idea of making it larger is kind of implicitly a lever, because you're saying, well, a 3 by 3, now the dimensions of the matrix are larger, right? And then I think most crossword puzzles are pretty much always the same dimension or something like that. Like the New York Times, I don't think they vary the size each time, but maybe they do, right? And then that's an implicit lever. So this is an interesting question. So just as an abstraction, the way it might apply to Overwatch, for example, this a big video game right now, is that you say, okay, so here are all the levers in the game. You've got these different people who have different abilities, and you might say, well, you don't have a level which allows for players to really use a certain ability. So, for example, one of the abilities in the game is teleportation, and let's say that is motivated, or it's allowed to happen by having the maps contain a certain sense of verticality. So if I'm a teleporting character, I want to teleport to the top and then maybe get a lay of the land and then snipe down. Okay, so there's this sniper chick, a widow, right, who can teleport by zooming up to the top of the building, and then there's also a character who what's his name? Death Calls, or whatever his name is. I can't remember. Reaper, that's it, right? So Reaper can actually teleport, or it's pretty much the same thing. It just takes longer. So there are these two kind of teleport characters. There's much more. There's characters that can fly up. So it just seems like it's a reasonable constraint on, or rather, not a constraint, but it's a reasonable expectation of your levels that they should accommodate this lever by having a sense of verticality within the maps. Okay, so if you say, well, there should be more maps with a sense of verticality, like that, if all the maps were flatlands, then it wouldn't really make sense, right? In Minecraft, it's nice to have the hillscape. Okay, so that is an example of a lever, a lever which allowed for a level to be added, right? However, here's another example. Let's say I said, you know what? All the characters should be able to drive vehicles, like in Halo 1, 2, 3, right? Well, that's really adding another lever. So it's not a reasonable comment to say that this game is not perfect because it doesn't have this lever. It's only reasonable to say a game is not perfect because it doesn't have this level to fully explore the lever. So the way that John Blow phrases this, which is probably a lot more concisely than I have explained it, I think I'm trying to be a little more technical, but the way he says it is, if somebody comes to me and they say, hey, I have a cool idea for your game, you should have had this, right? He has puzzle games, so he's like, well, you should have made a puzzle that did this. Then that means he failed in the thoroughness test. Because if he's like, yeah, damn, I should have put that in, then it's like, why didn't you? So that's kind of, that is the comment there. That's kind of the test, I guess, for whether or not the game was thorough enough. With that being said, there's another metric, which I think, in evaluating what games have really resonated with me, what's their impact. So impact would be the other metric I think of when I think of a perfect game. And the impact is kind of how long has this game stuck with you. And that really depends person per person, right? But like my favorite game, The Beginner's Guide, is perfect to me, or it matters a lot to me, because there's so many abstractions, or rather there's so many analogies within the game which I have connected to my current life after playing it. So, for example, I've been thinking a lot recently, especially over last week where I was having a hard time. I was thinking about this one analogy where the teacher is looking into the abyss and everything that's implied there. Such an awesome game, by the way. If you haven't played it, check it out. So that is a scene that really, really impacted me. And that's a game which is not very thorough, right? There's not a lot of gameplay. There's like 2 hours or something, and there's not a lot of levels. And could there have been more levels? Yeah, sure. And given the amount of levers which he had, which there was a lot, it was just storytelling, right? So the question is, would that game, is that game not perfect because it doesn't fully explore the concepts that were there? And I think it does adequately explore the concepts that were there. So for that reason, it's not ineligible for perfection by that standard. So here's the question. Is thorough precluding impact? Just because the game, if the game is super thorough, does it need to be super impactful? And like, for example, Pac-Man. It's maybe that's not a game that sticks with you for the end of your life, right? But like that, given the constraints, like I think it executes pretty well. And then maybe with the example of the Beginner's Guide, that's a game which is pretty thorough. Sorry, it's a game that has pretty big impact, at least for me. But there's certainly greater expanse it could have went to. So I don't think it needs to have either, to be honest. Whereas with the technical competency, I think it needs to have that. If the game crashes, then it's not perfect, and it really should be, right? So here's this quick diagram I drew, trying to visualize this. Hopefully it's not reversed, but basically the idea is you need, and this is the idea going off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's like you need technical competency. It can be impactful. It can be thorough. It can be both. But that's how you achieve this kind of parallel to actualization, which is perfection. And even with that 15-minute explanation, I don't think I've really scratched the surface on what is perfection in games and what metrics we might use to evaluate that. But, or even looking at the games I love, right? Tic-tac-toe, awesome game. Really perfect game, I think. That's a game, I guess it's impactful, but it's certainly thorough, right? Given the constraints, which are pretty straightforward, right? And it's a game that's solved too, which I think adds another lever of analysis to what is a perfect game. So, yeah, lots of questions there. I'm really excited to hear what you think of what are the ways should we be looking at games? What else should we be asking to determine if a game is perfect? And is there any other perfect game which you can think of that maybe doesn't correspond to the metrics I've laid out or the ones that you might intuitively consider? And why? Why is that game that you think of, why is it perfect? Even if it's not thorough or it's not very impactful or neither. That's kind of the question that's been on my mind.